call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers on February 9, 2023. All managers are present in person except for Manager Maxwell, who is absent. No members of the public. May I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Did you swear in? I'm sorry.
Madam President, you're still serving your existing terms, and the new term doesn't start till March 7th, so I think you
Cool
can
beans.
both sit there.
Thank you. I have a motion and second.
My second counts.
That's right. I second that.
Oh, we've lost track of who moved and seconded. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks to Ms. Johnson and our accountant for the financial report. That is an information item in our packet. And with the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from January 26th, and a resolution 23011, which is acceptance of tort liability limits on our property and casualty insurance policy renewal. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion from Manager Olson, second Manager Sando. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? My only report is that the meetings with the county commissioners continue, and I think we'll be completed with that round of meetings on the 14th, Valentine's Day. It's a present for us. If it's scheduled, we'll see what happens. Manager Loftus, can you give a report from the Operations and Programs Committee meeting?
We had one agenda item this evening, and that was the Minnehaha Creek Capital Project Planning update from our district administrator, Mr. Whisker. He focused on updating us on the status of work with the city of Minneapolis and the park board. And coming up in 2023, there will be discussions on some proposed projects in Minneapolis along the creek, and also possibly a steering committee working closely with those partners.
Thank you. The upcoming meetings are shown in our agenda. Note that we have our usual committee and board meetings, and on March 15th is the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting with Manager Olson as the liaison. Moving to action item 11.1, Resolution 23012, Ms. Christopher.
Thank you. Good evening, President Wright, Board of Managers. Tonight, staff is requesting authorization to apply for grant funding through the Board of Water and Soil Resources Watershed-Based Implementation Funding Program for 2 partner-led projects. And so first, just to give a little recap and overview of this program. This was started in 2018. Bowser has been transitioning its clean water funding model from competitive grants to this coordinated watershed funding approach that they refer to as the Watershed-Based Implementation Funding Program. This is the 3rd cycle that we're in now. Each one has been done a little bit differently in terms of the boundaries and process. And so this time around, funds have been allocated out of watershed planning areas, which are shown on the map. For this round, the Minnehaha Creek Watershed Planning Area has been allocated a little over $418,000 to fund eligible projects and activities for implementation by the end of 2025. And so it's not awarded to the watershed, but to our planning area. And so eligible entities in our area include the watershed, Hennepin and Carver counties, Carver Soil and Water Conservation District, and all the cities. And so the program requires what they call a convened meeting process, through which participants meet and develop a collaborative budget request for Bowser that's prioritized, targeted, and measurable. Eligible projects need to be, or for projects to be eligible, they need to be in an approved plan, which in this case is really just our watershed plan or the Carver County groundwater plan are the only 2 eligible. And so considering that this process was being done on our watershed boundary, the district served as the convener for this round and solicited project proposals from all eligible entities, and 2 were submitted for consideration, which I'll tick through. One submitted in partnership between the district and City of Long Lake is the Holbrook Park project, which probably sounds familiar from last meeting. This was a priority from the Long Lake Creek roadmap, and this is a regional stormwater treatment project in downtown Long Lake, shown in the red star there, which treats that kind of yellow highlighted drainage area. Estimated to achieve about 47 pounds of load reduction. Total cost is estimated at about 1.3 million. And again, this would be, the city has expressed a willingness to lead this project with support from the district, particularly for securing funding sources is kind of the biggest barrier for them moving this forward. So this would be a good start to get some initial funding to fund feasibility work. The other project is a ravine stabilization and pond project in Medina. That's shown again with the red star. It's in the upper portion of the Cannon Creek subwatershed. And so this would most directly benefit Lake Katrina by reducing sediment and nutrient loads. It's estimated to achieve a load reduction of about 30 pounds at a cost of about $343,000. And this is one that the city is prepared to lead and has already set aside some funds to cover the match. And they've had some conversations already with the landowners, so they kind of have a good start on that one. And so the partnership group met last month, and the group agreed that both projects were worth supporting and recommended splitting the $418,000 between the 2 projects. Staff is still in coordination with the 2 cities to finalize kind of what that split would be based on their ability to cover the match and just project schedules and other considerations, but this is sort of the approximate match that I think we're narrowing in on with about $243,000 for the Medina project, which it sounds like the city would be able to cover then the rest of the project costs to move that one forward, and then the remaining $175,000 could then go to the Holbrook project to allow us to start feasibility work while pursuing other grants in future cycles to fund implementation. And then it was also discussed and recommended by the group that the district serve as the grantee. And one of the reasons for that is that it would be much easier to transfer funds between the 2 projects as costs are dialed in. And if for any reason the projects fall through or can't be completed on the grant timeline, it would allow us to switch to one project or the other, or to an alternate project altogether within the watershed. And so there'd be some grant administration associated with that, but I think it would be pretty manageable, and we're pretty familiar with the Bowser grant process. In terms of next steps, there's kind of a few steps to the application process. The first is just kind of a high-level work plan that we would submit in coordination with the cities, and then there's more specific work plans for each project, which need to be approved by the end of March. And then from there, we finalize the grant agreement and do that in coordination with cooperative agreements with each city, detailing kind of how the funding would be passed on to the cities, and outlining roles and responsibilities for grant administration and any other support we might want to provide to either of these projects. So with that, staff is recommending authorization to apply for the watershed-based funding program for these 2 projects in partnership with cities of Long Lake and Medina, and I can take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Christopher. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So
Manager
moved.
Hejmati. I'll take a
Second.
second from Manager Olson. Any questions for Ms. Christopher?
Question.
Yes.
Becky, the 1.292 million, is that 175,000 for scoping out the project, and is that part of that 1.2?
The total cost of 1.3 is for design and construction, so the 175 would be essentially would allow us to start feasibility work, probably
But that's not included
do
in
some
that chart.
design.
Okay.
But yeah, we're certainly pursuing other funds for construction.
Okay, how much would we be pursuing at that point?
Well, I think it could be a good candidate through the Bowser competitive grants.
Mhm.
And then I've also had some preliminary conversations with the PCA Authority funds, we could explore that as a potential source. Otherwise, there will be another cycle of watershed-based funding in 2 years. No guarantee that it'll be the same process. You know, they might change, make adjustments again, but I think we've got a few sources we can pursue. And I think they'll likely want to apply through our Land and Water Partnership Program as well
Okay.
for funding from the districts.
Okay, well, thank you.
And I guess one other note too is both Hennepin County and City of Medina have also expressed interest in possibly contributing to this project. So I think we'll be able to piece together a lot of different sources.
Lake Katrina is in Baker Park,
Yeah.
Great.
but the project is off their property.
Correct. It's yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have the property boundaries shown on here, but yeah, I think it's upstream.
okay, thank you.
That would benefit Katrina.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Christopher? All those in favor of adopting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to the next item, Resolution 23013, Mr. Heyman.
All right. Good evening, Chair White, managers. I'm before you this evening with a contract amendment for the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie Restoration Trail Project. Not always the ideal reason for being before you this evening, but obviously a good opportunity to give you a construction update as well. So I'll do that. The typical construction contracting process is to handle this via change order, so there is a change order in your packet as well to help outline a little bit of what the changes would be on this site. So just to reorient everyone to the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie Restoration, it is in the 6 Mile Subwatershed, about halfway between Mud Lake and Halstead Bay. The district acquired, let's see if I can get my laser pointer to. So the district acquired the two parcels. They actually run all the way down to 6 Mile Creek and then up the edge here. So you have one large rectangular and then this triangle. We acquired two farmstead properties in 2011 and 2012. Excuse me, you can see the homestead and barn and silos and sheds here, and the second one up here. Those were originally, it's about 210 acres, 210 acres. We did demolish and remove all of the structures with the exception of the red barn, which through community feedback and conversations with Minnetrista, there was a desire to keep that as a landmark on the site. Following restoration design in late 2012 and 2013, we restored the site. That included elements such as breaking the tiles to allow for the wetlands to restore, as well as the upland prairie vegetation and some wetland habitat as well. Excuse me. In addition, we did conduct adaptive management for invasive species over the first 5 years or so, which included burning, selective haying, and spraying. And so a couple of views just of the site as it was restored from a couple of different perspectives. We started looking at this site for trail implementation around 2018, 2019 with our education program, actually. And I should have noted, during the original design, the trail was envisioned, and there was a preliminary design placed on the site. But there wasn't certainty on how the wetlands would respond with the breaking of the tiles and what might be the most enjoyable spaces to be on the site. So that was delayed. In 2018, 2019, after conversations with the Education Department, it ended up coming back to capital project planning to help lead the effort. And we did put it out for a design RFP then in early 2021 and selected Damon Farber in May of 2021 to lead that design effort. That was completed by September, and we went out for bids. You may recall in September of 2021, or I should say when bids were received in October, they were much higher than we'd anticipated. We received 2 bids, and they both were well above $200,000 higher than the opinion of probable cost. We'd identified a few reasons for why we thought that was the case, and the board opted to reject bids in November and hold off for a more favorable bid climate, which would have been through the winter, as well as we made some modifications to the design package to clarify some things that had been identified as lump sum, fix some elements around permitting and testing. And so following that bid solicitation, we did select urban companies in April of this year And that was for the base bid, plus 4 of the 5 alternatives. We opted to not increase or not go with an alternate that was a different trail material. The other 4 bid alternates were for interpretation. And I should note at the time too, when we selected G-Urban companies and started construction, which I can get into now, it was known that the steel was going to potentially be a problem for some of the interpretation elements. There were supply chain issues, and so they had anticipated a fall delivery. That's still a little bit behind schedule, but I'll touch on that at the end of the presentation. So as you can see, some of the trail construction, when G-Urban arrived on the site, they expected about 6 to 8 week excuse me, construction window. Knowing most of you that haven't been out to the site yet, since it has been constructed, I just thought we could take the opportunity to put a few different images in. The pictures here are just showing, once the trail is cut in, we use 2 different materials. So you have a class 5 base and then a class 2 goes on top of it. So what that starts to look like over a time lapse essentially is first they come and compact the site, then they'll grade in the original trail alignment, and then they'll come in and finish it behind with the seating and restoration. And so there's a couple of different images that kind of show what that looks like once it makes its way through the site. So this is what's out there today. There is also, and now there's much better vegetation where the seeding has occurred. But as with any construction problem or any construction site, there are some challenges that do arise. In this particular instance with the trail going through, being nearly a mile in length, there were a couple of pockets where you can see here we witnessed just very damp and wet soils, clay type soils during a drought year. And these are areas where you would want to have then a geotextile fabric below. We did have a bid item for geotextile, but the length at which was required was higher than the line item that we had. The other thing was, in order to keep ADA grades and make everything still fit within buffer requirements, as well as some survey discrepancies, as you can see here when you're working through some of these sloped areas, we did make field adjustments once the center line was staked. And so where it's compacted here is once those adjustments were made. There were areas where the survey was off and it would be coming through one of these, maybe a tight slope. And so those are some of the challenges that we faced that were a little bit unanticipated. And then the driveway itself was really a challenge because it was so compacted. It wasn't a good growth media. So we did actually opt to bring in topsoil and reduce that down to the 6-foot trail width, and place some boulders in front of the access so vehicles can't come into the site from Halstead Drive. So those are just a few of the images that describe what the change order all entails. To sort of lay it out from a cost perspective, the additional excavation was around $17,000. A lot of that was actually in the barn area or out in front of the barn area. The grades that hadn't necessarily been picked up were the former site of the shed and the 4 silos, and that area ended up being higher than anticipated, or than the survey and LiDAR had caught, and it was draining towards the barn, which was creating an issue for that gathering space. So there was a bit more excavation required there than anticipated. The additional geotextile fabric that I noted, of course, then there's some Class 2 and Class 5 aggregate in excess, and these are all documented through truck tickets, and then the enhancement of the former driveway to allow to prevent vehicular access and allow for better establishment. So that results in the numbers obviously where the base contract with Urban was $333,714. With contingency, the board had set a budget of $350,000. The change order totaled just over $40,000, which results in a contract of $372,748, or a net increase from the budget of about $24,000. And so, as I noted in the RBA, all of the quantities have been reviewed by Damon Farber as our construction oversight consultant, as well as by staff, and we are recommending approval of the revised contract given the quantity of materials that have been delivered to the site and installed by G-Urban. And I will note real quickly, because I did mention that we haven't installed interpretation yet, everything is in for the interpretation elements. You probably noticed little side areas that were cut out. All that remains is the steel components need to be placed, and they'll do that once frost is out, and they can pour the concrete and place what's now been fabricated. And so with that, Staff recommends Resolution 23013, the authorization of change order 1. Take any questions?
Thank you. Is there a motion
Move
to
approval.
adopt? Manager
Second.
Miller, second Manager Olson. Questions for Mr. Heyman?
The 350 was the original budget with its contingency, 10%?
We had a 5%
Yeah,
contingency on this
5%.
project.
Oh, okay,
Right.
thank you. Okay, go ahead. I was going to make a comment at the end.
Mike, how far in are they going to allow bikes off the main trail to come, how far to the barn and so forth?
Manager Sando, manager, so the trail was designed as a pedestrian trail.
Yes.
So at the Dakota Regional Trail where you see the bituminous connection, there's 67 feet of bituminous trail. That's just a requirement of Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority as a connection, and Three Rivers as a connection to their trail. There's a bike rack there that's now been installed, and that's where we would anticipate any users of Dakota Regional placing their bike and then wandering into the site.
Perfect. Last time I was out there, the bike was,
Yep.
rack wasn't there yet.
Yep.
And the other ones were the supply.
Yeah, that's
Problem.
correct. All of the signage, just a supply chain issue with steel
Yep.
earlier in the year. That's all been resolved now, and we just received word that it's all in fabrication right now.
What do you hope the target date to be for that?
Manager Sando, managers, they're expecting April, but it's all dependent upon when frost comes out and road restrictions. There
Yes.
shouldn't be an issue with road restrictions on this project, so it's a matter of if they can get in and pour concrete.
You could use some insulation in that barn.
Yeah.
Manager Olson, you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a major land acquisition with our conservation program, and so we have a big investment in this property, and the designs that we looked at and examined were expensive but of a high caliber, and we wanted to make sure that everything was done correctly. And what you're showing here is a willingness to keep doing it correctly instead of cut corners someplace to make up for the wet surfaces and all that kind of thing. So I appreciate you staying at that high level of quality that we're looking for, and I really appreciate the analysis and the breakdown of where those costs came from. Thank you.
This is the first time I've seen a photograph of the barn. That's really fun to see. I mean, the inside of the barn. I'm unfamiliar with the term truck tickets. Would you explain that?
Yeah, Chair White, manager. So every time another load or a truck hauls any materials into the site, they're required to provide us with a ticket that gives the overall weight or quantity of what is being delivered to the site, so we can actually account for that as the pay applications, the invoices come in. And so with the pay application, it requires a copy of every truck ticket, giving the quantities, where it was placed, and how that goes about. So that's typically how we account for any material that is delivered to the site or hauled off-site if they have an excess. In this instance, one of the reasons why there was additional aggregate needed was some of the soft soils, even where geotextile wasn't needed. As they started to roll it for compaction, it was consolidating with the material on site. And so to get to grades and actually get to the compaction required by testing, it would require potentially another bucket or 2 buckets, whatever the load might be for them to roll. So as that adds up over the week or week and a half that they're laying that, we've received the tickets as they're coming in.
Thank you. And all of these changes have already happened.
Yes, and so that is a consideration for the board. We didn't know what the final quantities of aggregate were. We've only paid the contractor for the bid amount, and had noted that anything over, above, and beyond, because the contractor had opted to invoice the district in one invoice, and that was their choice, but we didn't receive the invoice until it was October or November, well after the work was complete. That's when we recognized the discrepancies and have gone back through and conducted all the analysis. So they understand that we're here this evening. I'm requesting it, but they have not been paid for anything above the bid items.
Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Heyman?
That was risky of them, but
All those in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And number 13 on our agenda, are there any board inquiries, issues, or ideas that they would like to submit this evening? Then we'll look to Mr. Whisker for the administrator's report.
Thank you, President White. Managers, I think a running list of issues, inquiries, and ideas just to keep it live is doing some more research into the Supreme Court ruling and then making sure that presentations that the board's provided are accessible to the board after the meeting. So we're working on that. We'll probably do that through OneDrive or Dropbox, where every presentation you get, those will be libraried for you to access and look at to your heart's content after the meeting. So a brief update for you tonight. Manager Loftus kindly facilitated brainstorming at our last policy and planning committee with the board to begin having the board look into the future and begin mapping 5-year priorities for the organization as we close the door on a really successful 5-year chapter. And I think it went quite well. Obviously, there's some friction with the digital meetings and everybody being in different spaces. It's nice to have everybody in person tonight. But the idea is to carry that forward and have it culminate in a board retreat sometime this year. And then I think ultimately take the results of some of the priority setting and turn that into our next 5-year clear strategic action plan. It seemed to go pretty well. Some of the results, we got about 6 major areas of ideas, and I'm not going to go through the full punch list, but we'll mirror this out to the board in a memo coming up. But there's a lot of discussion and focus on our mission-driven projects and initiatives. A lot of discussion around the different focal geographies between Minnehaha Creek and potentially entering phases of work in Minneapolis, 6 Mile Creek, Halstead Bay, where we're going with the Long Lake Creek roadmap, at what point does Painter Creek become a focal geography. So there seemed to be a fair volume of discussion around, or idea generation around project scale and priority. That's on the project side. A complement to that was a lot of discussion around an idea generation around climate action, our next water management plan, the policy focus around climate, and what we're going to be working on for the next 3 to 5 years as we approach our 2027 plan. Another category was continuing to invest in building and strengthening partnerships with municipalities, public agencies, private developers, other land use decision makers. Leveraging the work that we've already done and continuing to invest in our reputation, brand management, identity, taking one success and parlaying it into the next area of work that we want to pursue. A lot of discussion around sound science, data-driven decision making, becoming a data-driven culture, how we're going to use our 2D model, measuring progress, and identifying when we're complete, and then discussions around culture and relationships internally with board CAC staff, continuing their outreach, diversity, equity, inclusion, including building out an equity lens. So there are kind of 6 major areas of discussion. I guess one question for the board this evening is, I could see us continuing that pattern through February, March, April, PPC, continuing to refine, generate more ideas, refine, focus these buckets, have a retreat, and then have that be then synthesized and distilled by staff into our next strategic plan. Or we could just hop straight to an April or May retreat when Manager Maxwell returns. But looking for some feedback on how that meeting felt, and if you'd like to continue that pattern of discussion moving forward, using the policy committee meetings at the end of each month to keep workshopping.
Thank you. I'll just open the floor for comments.
I'd be interested to know what Jessica's position is on it, because, it was...
And you don't necessarily have to facilitate us
It
on
was
the
pretty,
eyeballs there.
it's pretty evident that she's been through this kind of process before. And I think we really got a lot out of it. Well, what would you say the next steps would be for us?
Well, I think it helps to have a one-pager, James, of the ideas, I love it, of those 6 main categories and the ideas you generated. I think you probably generated, I'm sure, over 100 ideas, would you guess?
There's a lot of ideas, yeah.
and then the categories, and then it's really, you have to ask yourself how much you want to drill down into those. Do you want to have the top 3 priorities of each of those? Do you want to have work plans under those? You can just keep drilling down and drilling down. So I guess that's what I would advise you to think about is what level do you want to be at, and then what level do you want to hand it off to staff at? Because you could just keep going and going.
Well,
I don't have the answer for that for you guys.
it seems to me that you and Sherry and James should get together then and make a proposal, so, because otherwise it's just gonna be another meeting and, go through it and, not have a real plan and a focus. And just, like a lot of stuff has been started over the years, and for a whole bunch of reasons, it doesn't get done. All good reasons, James, but it doesn't get done. And we should just, keep on bringing those things up. And
Yeah, I mean, some of the harder work, it gets harder the next level as you go, is you end up, what are your top strategies, what are the top 3 things that have to happen to make this work, and what are your measurables, or is the next one of how do you know you did what you said you were going to do, and what do you measure that by?
it's gonna be a mess for you.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know that you want to go down that road. So.
Well, I think we should set up a process that we go down it over a period of time maybe, and not just for the retreat, but, it'd be kind of an annual dig deeper process.
But I think what you have to start with is great. There's a lot of ideas and some main themes, and if you have specific strategies under those and some specific targets, I don't know if the board will be doing that work or if staff is doing that work. I guess that's something James and I could talk about. But
I can bring candy this time.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I had one job to do. I'm interested to
everybody
hear
got
from
one piece.
I'm interested to hear from the rest of the board, their just perspective on the meeting and where they'd like to go. I have some ideas in terms of, I agree, where you would drill down and where there's some work to be done, where staff might imprint on strategies for people to react to, continue to invest in our reputation and building partnerships. I think that we can pencil out some strategies. You probably don't need a work plan per se. The mission-driven projects, we're in a project-rich environment, it looks like, with Long Lake. We'll see where we go with Minneapolis. We're finishing out work in Hopkins, St. Louis Park. We've got portfolio work that's being advanced in 6 Mile. There's questions around Painter. That seems to be, we have a 5-year CIP, but that seems to be an area where the board could spend quite a bit of time and meet community demand for when are you going to get into Painter. We've talked about the requests from Harrison's Bay and others, and people wanting to know when we pick up and move. So there are some areas where it seems like there's more drill down for the board to do, where you could probably stay higher level and it'd be, not have to go as deep, but I'm curious to hear from everybody else.
Well, I like projects, all this other stuff that, in support of it. That's what we do. Branding and all that other kind of stuff is ancillary to it. It helps make projects successful and all that, I understand that. But we gotta put some timetables on some of this stuff.
Or at least establish priorities and things like that, so.
What's that?
Or at least establish priorities,
Yeah.
if we can't put an exact time on it.
Well, and the impact it's gonna have on staff, we need more staff to,
Yep.
when we're down to half of what we had, 2-3 years ago.
Not quite, but
Well, pretty close for government work.
Hyperbole.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
No,
no, Ray,
go
you
ahead.
first. Go ahead.
Okay. Usually, from my experience, after a brainstorming process is that the brainstorming is quick and you get big picture, but then going through the details of it takes a long time usually, and takes a lot of effort, because then you have to look at each one and set priorities, which is important, and why are we doing this, and this, and trying to do all of that. I'm trying to answer your question, James. Do we want to do it step by step or in one piece in the retreat? That's a process that also needs to evolve. That as we do it, we make some priorities, then we stop and think about it and see whether we agree with that or not. So my suggestion would be to give us the time to think through these PPC meetings and do some of that preliminary work, so that when we get to the retreat, a lot of the pieces have been worked on, and we assemble it into an integrated plan or a document or something at that point in time. So in terms of process, that's the way I think about it.
So I want to be sure I'm following, that you think that would be a good idea to break it out into committee discussions leading up to April?
Yes, but in a planned way, say,
Sure.
okay, which ones are we going to do, how, and then finally know what we're going to bring to the retreat. So we're always thinking of, because in the retreat we won't have much time to get that level of detail. We've got to get big picture, and if we need to do the detail, we take the PPC time to do it.
Could that be a committee meeting subject?
Well, that's been my sense, and I wanted to ask the board. I don't want to spin up a whole program of committee discussions that Manager Loftus is really willing to run, unless the whole board's wanting to do that. I'm just kidding. But I think taking it in pieces is obviously a pretty smart approach.
Sure.
And then you can assemble that in the retreat. And I agree, we don't want to write a plan for a plan. I think if the board's pretty comfortable and you're really cohesive as a team, just being a little bit adaptive and having the process evolve as we go. But as Manager Loftus, I think Manager Hajmati said, yes, you can go into detail, and this could take a ton of time, but it can take as much time as you want to take. You could work on this for a year and a half and not reach bedrock. So I think as we go, my sense is there's areas where you can drill down and spend some time, and there are other areas that are probably higher level. My preference would be to see how much work we can get done leading up to a quasi mid-year retreat, and then put that together into a clear action plan, work plan for the next 5 years, so that we can start thinking about 20 years. That's just me. So I think that we could use the operations committee to keep bringing work forward. President White's asked through the agenda setting for a quick status update on where we are with website, and that's really how we'd originally envisioned the two committees being structured anyways. Oversight of work in queue, and then more policy direction and planning. So I think we have some space, it looks like, in the pending agenda list, where at the last meeting of every month we could chip away at some of these pieces, see where we land leading up to a May retreat. Could be a June retreat, depending on how far we decide to get, and then try and put the pieces together.
I want to bring up a point. Jessica and I, don't have a problem with stuff being put before us just to get it, through the board. But there should be a little discipline about what's before each committee with a kind of a plan, like you just stated. I mean, I think that would help a lot to get this into a systematic analysis and plan. If we make it an agenda item and review the progress at planning, policy, or at the operations committee, and see, you accomplished, a third of it, or we're going to abandon that plan because, we can't get the partners right now, and stuff like that. Maybe that could be part of it too.
Well, and
I'm just loading you up with.
it sounds like we already passed that agenda item. This is the administrator's report. I think that we're in a space now where we've got a little bit more breathing room It's been a 5-year sprint and then through a pandemic, and we've had a lot of work trying to get through Q with restructuring and initiatives, and now that makes, I feel the same way. You know, we could get a little bit more structured in reporting in on progress on initiatives and using the policy committee to be more forward-thinking. It's just the space that
What's a reasonable time to expect to have staff pull together a report out from
the last.
last committee meeting? Okay, so then we can build on that to break out committee topics,
Yep.
batches of issues for discussions.
But I
I can
think
also give James a couple samples of different end products
Yeah.
and see where he sees value and where we want to end up, and we could
That'd be
decide how
helpful.
you get there.
Yeah, that would be great.
You said POC, are there policy issues on that list?
I think they're all
Policy and projects.
pretty big policy issues. Yeah, I mean, the Policy and Planning Committee was always envisioned to be more forward-facing, directional setting, policy
So I was
shaping.
going to say, we could divide up those subjects into
Yeah,
both
so
committees.
like one of these containers on here is capital projects, and, we've got, like I said, all these different directions we could go. When might it seem reasonable to get into Painter Creek? We asked that question a number of years ago, and I think the board said, well, we have our hands full with these 2 focal geographies. We're gonna stay there, no thanks, and we don't want to scale up into it, let's see how we go. Well, the appetite for doing that might have changed, and we're obviously further along in our program in those. So there's a lot of questions you could ask in drilling down, just in terms of our big project portfolio. What's our approach to Long Lake Creek? I think Manager Miller said at the last meeting, wants that in front of committee and really be talking about the projects, but we've postured that as we have 2 projects and the rest are the cities and we'll respond to them. So there's some questions in there just on balance in our whole capital project approach. I think in the next bucket of climate action, one of the things that we could probably spend some time on is just making sure the board's clear on the action plan. There's a lot of work in Appendix A in our climate action framework that's supposed to happen over the next 5 years. There is already a work plan in there of really big initiatives that we need to tick through. So there are areas of substance that you can drill down. I think if we were to talk about partnership and branding and outreach, that might be a lighter touch. But you could definitely break these into, some groupings, and I could work with President White and Manager Loftus to think about how we structure our time over February, March, and April to get as much done here as we can.
You typically would, go after your idea generation into like a SWOT analysis, but this organization is very self-aware, so I don't think you need that. And then, because then you go and you marry your strengths to which goals make the most sense, and those are the ones you want to take action on the quickest, right? Because you've got the capacity, you've got the ability, and you've got the desire to do it. And then, so I think there's some of those steps you can just, you've got the groundwork and the foundation for it already that
Sure.
I think you can kind of cherry pick what you want to do.
They specialize in strength.
You do. I mean, obviously there are some threats you should be aware of. Everyone has, weaknesses and threats that they need to be aware of. But this organization is very aware and utilizes their strengths very well already. So, and knows about their opportunities. So I think you're in a really good position to cherry pick what you think serves your needs.
Have you had enough feedback?
I think so. Or what's your perspective or Steve's?
I like the idea of bringing it through committee and focusing on pieces of it. And as Arun said, the retreat would be a very short meeting compared to the amount of work there is to be done.
Are we done with that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Did you want to add anything to this, Steve? What's your
No,
point of view?
not at all.
Do you like the idea of breaking it out into smaller chunks?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Sounds good. Go forth and do good work. That's what I heard. And we'll
now we're
get some
done.
help from President White and Manager Loftus just about the rhythm and scope and sample products and their
Excellent.
expertise will be really helpful.
Under board inquiries, issues, and ideas, and I want to add another one, compliments.
We already left that.
No, I know, but I.
You did a nice job
I
calling
added
that.
compliments on the end of it, so we. it's
All
a
right.
new Category.
Is the acronym IC?
Oh, no.
James and Lewis
Switch the order of those.
spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks working with the county attorney and others on clarity on this appointment authority. And even over the weekends and stuff. So I really want to, they weren't involved in our behavior. They weren't advocating our appointments, but they were advocating the system to make sure that the county board had all the information when they were making a decision. And I really appreciate that. And
Yes.
because it was very complicated and messy, and a lot of different people had different opinions on it. And James and Lewis really got clarity, and it resulted in our appointments being made unanimously. But they weren't advocating for us, but they make sure that everybody understood what the rules were, both by the state law and the Supreme Court. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I agree with that 100%. And what I really saw was that both of you took a leadership position. My sense, based on what we were talking a little bit to James about it, was that they were really relatively unaware of what was going on, and that the guidance that you gave them, it was really interesting, very skillful the way you did that. That is, you're outsiders and you're guiding. You're not part of Hennepin County, and you're showing Hennepin County how to manage it and helping direct them think. It was done very respectfully and very collegially and done in such a way that things were properly moved forward. And that sort of leadership that you did was really absolutely exemplary, really wonderful. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you, Arun.
Any more compliments?
Well, I'm going to add another, after compliments, I'm going to put complaints in too.
CC?
Well, I'm
Take
all
it under
covered then.
Now we're
consideration,
at
Manager
Vic.
Miller. Yes.
Compliments?
Yeah.
Okay, Jessica, a couple weeks ago, conducted that meeting, and the enthusiasm and the feedback of everybody, you really headed it up really very, very, very well. So got everybody thinking, so that's very well
Well, she's
done.
professional.
Yeah.
I wish I could have been in the room. It was a great
Yeah,
session.
it was hard online, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was harder.
It was
But
fun,
no,
it made it fun.
It was
Oh,
fun.
Yeah, that's what's important.
good.
Except
Thank
there's
you
no
for yours.
candy, I understood.
Yeah.
There'll be candy.
No, everyone got one piece. We had
You're
to
going
like
to have
ration
so much
it.
candy, you're going to be
It's like
mad
we-
at the
yeah.
next meeting.
Any more compliments?
I want to thank Deb for, this is a great add to the agenda.
Yeah, we could just be here all night.
I know,
Yeah.
for the fourth quarter report, the last
Yeah.
couple years, she's worked really
That
hard
was really
on
good.
making those concise, informational, summaries. And I'm always especially interested in the third and fourth quarter. Gives us a lot of rich information. Not that, second quarter kind of piques your interest of what might happen the other half of the year, but I'm not trying to diss first quarter. It's great too, but there's not a lot that's happened yet in the first quarter. Thank you for all the work you put into it. I know working with our accounting consultant isn't always, it takes extra effort to get it in a format that your picky treasurer wants to see it in. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Manager.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
It is helpful to me to read that, so I appreciate it.
The meeting is adjourned.
No more compliments?
No,
No, that's
go
it.
back.
We gotta
Work on
save some for next
That's the
time.
quarter for the year.